A couple of travel thoughts. Hi everyone, Leo Notenboom here for AskLeo.com. I was browsing some of my reports, the analytics on AskLeo.com, and I noted that two of the most popular articles are travel related. Well, as it turns out, I've been doing a little bit of traveling myself and I'm about to do some more. And those articles actually happen to be relevant to where I'm going next. In a couple of weeks from the time I shoot this video, I'm going to be heading out to the Netherlands, the country of my parents' birth and where all of my blood relatives happen to be. Now, the interesting thing about Holland, or Europe in general actually, is of course that the electricity there is configured differently than it is here in the United States. In the United States and in Canada, our voltage is 120. You'll hear it referenced as 117, maybe even 110 in some cases, but any of those numbers are roughly equivalent when you're talking about the power coming out of your wall. In addition, the socket that is provided, well, it's more along the lines of these, where you've got the two flat metal parallel blades and then an optional third prong at the bottom for ground. Now, in Holland, of course, and in Europe, the prongs are quite different. The prongs are essentially two round parallel prongs. The reason I'm carrying this, by the way, is it's a converter. It actually will convert and allow me to plug in my US-based power adapters, usually the chargers for my phone or computer, and have them actually plug into a European wall socket. I actually have a few of these of different configurations, but this is probably the most obvious one. Now, the good news is that I can make the prongs fit. The bad news is that this doesn't change the electricity. This is just a straight connection from one kind of prong to another. That means that the device you're plugging in needs to be able to handle the different electricity. In the case of most computers, power supplies, and even USB chargers, such as the one I'll be carrying with me, they actually are designed to be able to handle not just 120 or 240, the voltage that exists in Europe, but they can handle it actually anything between about 100 and 250 volts. They automatically switch. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons I believe they're called switching power supplies. They handle whatever voltage you give them, and they output the voltage that they're designed to output. As long as you have one of these kinds of power supplies or power adapters that is designed to handle the entire range from, like I said, 100 to 250 volts, you just use it. All you really need to do is use something like this to convert the prongs, and it just plugs in and works. It's actually kind of handy. What I found out several years ago, of course, is that not everything works that way. For example, I'm not taking a surge protector with me this time because last time I traveled to a foreign country with a different voltage, the surge protector, which you would think would only be wires related to getting the electricity from the socket to from the wall socket to the array of sockets in the protector, you'd think those would only be wires. In reality, there was circuitry in there, and the circuitry most definitely did not like the different voltage, to the extent that simply plugging it into the wall caused a short that caused my entire hotel room to go dark, and I had to very sheepishly ask for help to get the power turned back on. But like I said, as long as the device you're plugging in can handle the different voltages, you're fine. If it can't, and definitely check, because if it can't, you can do some serious damage. You don't want to be just using something like this. They do make larger, bulkier, heavier transformers that actually take the 240 voltage coming in and convert it to 110. But as I said, they are bigger, they are heavier, they are more expensive, and they're not really very convenient for traveling at all. Most of your electronics will have power supplies and adapters that'll adapt to the appropriate voltage that's coming from the wall. And all you'll need is this, or something very much like it, depending on where you're going. In my case, all I'm taking are the chargers for my phone, the power adapter for my laptop, and I should be good to go. Everything else that I'll be using will be already there, and the correct voltage as a result. So that's power. Like I said, that is one of the two surprisingly common articles, very popular articles on Ask Leo, having to do with voltage and power supplies and what you can and can't plug into different devices. And remember, when I'm talking about 110 or 220, what I'm talking about is the input voltage, the voltage that's coming from your wall. Your power supplies will probably work just fine with those different voltages, and they will output whatever voltage is appropriate in whatever form is appropriate for the device they're designed to work with. The other issue that comes up, and it is something that I do plan to play with, is this concept of getting locked out of your email account. Specifically, Microsoft Hotmail, or rather Outlook.com these days, in order to fight rampant account theft, has introduced, some time ago actually, a scenario where if you're logging in from somewhere that you don't usually log into, especially if that's an overseas country, they will then require some kind of additional verification that you are who you say you are. Normally, this is in the form of a text message sent to the phone number that you've registered with your account, or an email sent to some other email account that you've registered as an alternate address for your Outlook.com account. The problem, of course, is that text messages, well, they don't always work when you're traveling. In my case, my plan should allow me to accept or receive a text message when I'm traveling in Holland, but it's not uncommon for people to travel without their mobile phone at all, if they even have one to start with. It's also not uncommon for people to configure a recovery phone number with their account and then change that phone number without updating the account. That, of course, means that it doesn't matter whether or not the phone they have with them can accept a text message. It's not going to be the right phone number, so they won't be able to get that text message that would allow them to confirm that they are who they say they are. Similarly, with email addresses, there are two very common scenarios. One is people will set up an alternate email address and then let that account lapse, let that account go away without updating the alternate email address in their Outlook.com account. As a result, when some kind of verification code is emailed to that old email address, they no longer have access to it, so they can't get the recovery code that they need. Similarly, and I've seen this one, it's a real catch-22. If the recovery code is sent to another Outlook.com email address, in other words, if you've got address A at Outlook.com and B at Outlook.com is your recovery address, well, trying to access account B could run you into the same kind of verification issue that you have trying to access account A. In fact, it's not uncommon for people to have A be the recovery address for B, in addition to B being the recovery address from A. If they're both asking for recovery codes at the same time before they'll let you into your email, you're stuck. You can't get at either recovery code to access either account. If you take a look at the article, there are many, many annoyed people because they're left without access to their email, because the recovery process that's trying to protect them from account theft is actually protecting them, so to speak, from being able to access the accounts themselves. So those are a couple of things I actually plan to test with a little bit when I travel to Holland in a couple of weeks. A couple of the things I'll be trying will, of course, be just a direct access of my Outlook.com account, but I'll also be trying to use a VPN. The VPN should, if it's working, allow me to appear as if I've come from the United States. In fact, I will make sure to access my Outlook.com account through the VPN so that it will appear as if I'm coming from some place that I've come from before. That should, in theory, be enough for Outlook.com not to get quite so hinky about, this account being accessed from a different location. I'll report back on that when it happens. So, those are the two issues that people seem to find very interesting, based on the traffic to Ask Leo, issues that I'm going to be encountering or at least playing with myself here in a couple of weeks. Do you have ideas, thoughts, and concerns about what it means to travel overseas and the kinds of issues that you might like to see me maybe play with a little bit while I do this traveling? Let me know. As always, here's a link to this article out on AskLeo.com. Be sure to leave your comments there. They're all read. They're all moderated. We keep the trolls out that way. And I would love to hear what kinds of thoughts and experiences you have with respect to international travel and account access, or electricity access. Until next week, I'm Leo Notenboom for AskLeo.com. As always, remember, stay safe, have fun, and don't forget to back up, especially before you go overseas.